Hey there, digital world. Welcome back once again to another episode of Spliced In Later. It's been a bit since I last spoke to you. I believe almost just over a week or just on. Apologies for that. My last episode was reviewing Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate, so it has taken me a week to get over that travesty of a film. Not really, but you know, it was not a very fun time to talk about that thing. And then I did want to talk about the Oscars. I managed to watch all the movies for Best Picture before that came out. And then they sort of came and went without any real surprises or upsets. So I didn't really feel like talking about it in the end. What we expected to happen, happened. What we didn't expect to happen, didn't happen, really. So, whatever. But also, we got a couple episodes coming over the next few weeks. We've got about 3 reviews back to back start kicking off this Thursday, Friday. So we do have a lot of episodes coming for you. When I say we, I mean I. But so you know, I took that to be, let's take a week to regroup and recuperate. And also because I decided that I would get an episode in between the Doom Syndicate and the next review, which in a way sort of encompasses a couple of things. One, it hammers home the real awesomeness of a great movie that has existed in our film past. It provides explanations and reasonings for one of the few times on this show that I have gone absolutely negative when we strive really hard here to be as positive as possible. And it is sort of an understanding of the definition of an insanity, you know, where you do the same thing different times and expect different results. I think that's how it goes. Whatever. You know what I mean. When you know something's going to suck, but you do it anyway with the hope that it's going to have a different result and it still sucks. Who knows? So that's this whole episode in total. And even though you know what it's about, I'm going to be coy about what we're building to. But overall, we are kind of discussing Ghostbusters as a whole. But I'm going to title this episode Ghostbusters 1984, the original, because I think the majority of this episode will be just explaining why that movie's awesome. But in reference to that, the legacy of Ghostbusters, how people feel about it, what people remember about it, what they choose to latch onto, what they choose to forget, what they choose to misinterpret, I suppose. Because we live in an age now where Ghostbusters keeps trying to be something that it's not, I guess. And while originally I thought that the people as a whole were able to see through the missteps of Ghostbuster revivals, I've found that also sometimes I'm the one in the minority, and I don't get that. So I guess what we're going to do here is we're going to start in a roundabout way. We're going to talk about Ghostbusters now in preparation for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, the newest Ghostbusters film that comes out this week. In terms of how many Ghostbusters films exists, this is the 5th one. In terms of how much they want you to think exists, this is the 4th one. So we're going to do a roundabout way about that before heading back to the very beginning. Now, Spliced In Later. We've been doing this for a long time now, almost 5 years. Some could argue I didn't need to do it this long. I don't really have a huge following, and, you know, it's not particularly fancy or exciting or extravagant. I mean, even now as you're listening, you can probably hear the background noise of my fan going. Is that professional? Probably not. But it's 1,000,000 degrees here in Australia, and I'm sweltering, so we're just going to kick on with that. But when I kicked this thing off, apart from it being a hobby, where it's like, oh, you know, you do like movies a lot, you tend to talk about them a lot. Why not provide yourself an outlet to get this information out? Is it because you know what you're talking about, or is it because we're sick of hearing you talk about it? Doesn't really matter. The point is, I got a microphone and I started on it. And the mission statement of it in the beginning was positivity, looking on the bright side of things. I've said it many times here on the show, a lot of things you find on YouTube or podcasts or whatever tend to lean towards the negative. Why? Well, because it's more fun for people to hate on things, I think, than to just appreciate when they enjoy something. Not that I'm saying that everyone should like everything all the time. Art is subjective. What someone else may hate, you in fact love, and vice versa. But at least in my understanding, when I wanted to look to see what people thought about movies, the loudest voices were always the naysayers, the ones who shit on things, who said terrible things, a bit nasty in their approach. I mean, even now, we're coming off Madam Web. Madam Web was not a good movie, but it's just being beaten over the head to a point where, if you've seen that Simpsons episode where Homer's Krusty the Clown for a day or whatever, and he's doing a promotion at Krusty Burglar, and the Krusty Burglar shows up, and he thinks he's actually stealing the Krusty Burgers, so he beats that guy to a pulp, and one of the kids is crying, saying, "Stop, stop, he's already dead." That's kind of what the attitude to Madam Web is right now. We get it, it was a bad movie, but we keep piling on about how bad it is. And, you know, there may be some people out there who really liked Madam Web, and every time they go online and they hear about how Madam Web's terrible and everybody who likes it probably has a low IQ or something, you know, it can hurt. Now, my approach is not to be, this is good, everything is good, everyone should just be happy all the time. It's just trying to have an even balance. Yes, I didn't enjoy it, but again, what I may not enjoy, you may like. And I can talk about some of the positives in here too. I may not have liked this, but I can appreciate what was trying to be done here and all of that. And for the most couple of years, from 2019 to 2021, I think I followed that pretty solidly. And then I saw Ghostbusters Afterlife, and that is on record as being the first time that not only have I hated something so much, but I was unable to mask that in my review, and I was just baffled at the idea of anybody liking it and defending it. We'll get to that in a minute. And in retrospective, looking back on that, as we go into another Ghostbusters, which I have already got tickets for and I'm going to see, you may ask, why are you doing that? One, for content. Two, I have this in my head that I always want to see everything of a franchise that I'm invested in, even if I don't like it. If I watch a show and the show starts getting bad in season 5 or whatever, I'll keep watching that show until it finishes, whether it's at the end of season 5 or if it pushes on to season 9, because I'm committed to what's happening. And also, I like to be surprised. I like the idea that something that I'm not enjoying can turn itself around and suddenly it can be one of the coolest things ever. Case in point, the Hellboy 2019 movie. I didn't like that at all when it was in the movie theaters. On a DVD rewatch, I think it's secretly a brilliant film. Please don't click away. Please listen to everything I have to say. Please. Let's round it about. So let's start with 2016. 2016 Ghostbusters reboot, or Ghostbusters Answer the Call, or whatever they're calling it at that point. So the Ghostbusters in 2016 was the first attempt to revitalize the Ghostbusters franchise. If you don't even know what the Ghostbusters franchise is, okay. Thank you for listening, I guess. Ghostbusters is all built on a very successful little film, a comedy film that was released in 1984, starring Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis, directed by Ivan Reitman, about a bunch of guys that just start catching ghosts in New York. Very simple, very funny, builds on the comedy stylings of Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, etc. And took off. It was huge. Garnered a huge following. After that, it had a sequel. It made some cartoons, toys, whatever. But for the most part, it stayed back in the 80s and the early 90s, I guess. But in 2016, it was like, I guess Sony either bought the rights to Ghostbusters or they realized they had this as an IP and they needed to make money off of it. But they decided to reboot the Ghostbusters, not do a sequel or anything. They were just sort of redoing it. To this day, I don't know if the Ghostbusters 2016 exists in the same world as the original Ghostbusters. The original trailer says that 30 years ago, 4 men saved New York, and today a new team of Ghostbusters answers the call. But then you watch the movie, and you have all the original actors playing different characters in the movie, and they're talking like ghosts have never existed. So I don't think it is. I don't know. To this day, it still confuses me. Now, the thing about the Ghostbusters remake, I'll go on record as saying that it's not a terrible movie. It's not good, but it's not the garbage dumpster fire that I think it has a reputation for even before the movie even came out. In contrast to the other Ghostbusters film that came out after this, I prefer this. I think this is closer to the mission statement of Ghostbusters 1984 than anything we got after it. Not counting Frozen Empire because I haven't seen it yet. But, you know, I have a feeling they're not going to stray too far from what they already did before that. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff around Ghostbusters, rather than the 2016 movie, rather than the movie itself. Obviously, the big thing about it was, what if it were 4 women instead of 4 men? So you got Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, Kate McKinnon, and Leslie Jones. And immediately that became a huge internet thing of like, it's women instead of men. Men don't want women to be Ghostbusters. Very manufactured marketing. There was probably actually a genuine vitriol response to this. The idea of women taking the place of men. I'm sure there are many people behind their keyboards that were like, no. The problem with what happened after that is that Sony and Paul Feig and everybody involved in Ghostbusters 2016 leaned into that. They used that as part of their marketing. It was like, you've got to see Ghostbusters because you have to defend women's rights. You have to show up for women everywhere. Which is fine, sure. But then also took everybody who was a Ghostbusters fan before this movie and all put them in the same box of being incel white trash people. And that's not true. For the most part, most Ghostbusters fans just didn't care, I think. But, you know, it all became a thing like, men don't want you to see Ghostbusters, so you have to see it, whatever. Who cares? The movie itself, when it came out, was a generic comedy of the 2016s, especially directed by someone like Paul Feig, who had done Bridesmaids before it. Very silly, toilet humor sort of stuff. There was a lot of improvisation, especially from like Chris Hemsworth in there as well. And it was a very simple, the 4 girls have to come together, they become Ghostbusters, and they fight a ghost. Not that much different from the original, just in terms of the quality of the jokes and the material and everything a part of it, it was just very much inferior. I remember I watched it, and afterwards I was like, whatever, it was fine. Let's go see Independence Day Resurgence now. I believe the critical response was probably negative, quite mixed maybe. Whatever. It wasn't a success. I believe it was a big box office flop as well. So that was the end of that. Which was bad for Sony, because when you watch that movie at the start, it says brought to you by Ghost Corps. So they literally created a division of their Sony devoted to making Ghostbusters movies. And their very first one was a disaster. So it goes away for a bit. And then Jason Reitman comes along, the son of Ivan Reitman, and announces he's creating his own Ghostbusters movie. A Ghostbusters movie that is a direct sequel to the original 2. Not a reboot, not existing in its own universe. It is a direct follow-up to those originals. Meaning, first off, ouch to Melissa McCarthy and Leslie Jones and everyone involved in that Ghostbusters. I doubt anyone approached them to tell them they were being unceremoniously kicked aside. But whatever, that's Hollywood for you. Even then, the marketing for it was all like nostalgia. Obviously, we're in a big nostalgia period as well. I don't know if people can see through it or not. I feel like with how Marvel's sort of dipping, and Star Wars as well, and Harry Potter, at least the general consumer is getting over it. But there was a point where, and I can be at fault for this, nostalgia tricked people into thinking that what they were watching was a good thing. They play music that you remember, they bring back characters from things you love, and immediately you're like, because I see the thing that I recognize, I like it, and it's good. When really, what have they actually done to deserve that from you? A prime example, Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald. One of the worst movies of all time. I think even Harry Potter fans agree with me with that. When I saw that on opening night with a whole bunch of Harry Potter fans, and we went out afterwards, and I was perplexed at what I saw. One day I'll do a whole episode on that, because Jesus Christ, what a movie. I went up to some of the people, and I was like, did you like that movie? Genuinely curious. And they were like, yeah, that was pretty awesome. I thought it was great. I was like, okay, whatever, you can like what you like. But then I asked, what was your favorite part of that movie? And they went, when we went to Hogwarts. I was like, what about going to Hogwarts did you like? And it's like, we saw Professor McGonagall. They played the music. Dumbledore was teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts. It's like, yes, but what about those scenes did you like? What about those scenes added to your overall enjoyment of the movie's plot as a whole? It's like, I just liked that, seeing that. Hogwarts made me happy. It's like, okay, sure. And that is kind of what nostalgia is. And it's everywhere. It's bringing back all the Spider-Man for Spider-Man No Way Home. It's showing up, Charles Xavier showing up in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It's putting something that you remember into something, but not really giving it context or depth to belong where it is. And honestly, that's Ghostbusters Afterlife towards the end. Now, I don't really want to talk too much about Ghostbusters Afterlife. I got a whole review about that. You can go and check that out. That's a fun time in and of itself. But watching that movie, I remember that I wanted to walk out on it. I did not like it. I was bored in a lot of places. I was annoyed. And then it has the thing which I'm going to touch on briefly, which is the CGI Harold Ramis. Obviously, there was a lot of talk about whether the original Ghostbusters would come back for Ghostbusters Afterlife. They're all old. Bill Murray notoriously doesn't give a shit about Ghostbusters. But of course, Harold Ramis is dead. So you can't have all the Ghostbusters come back together. Just not possible. In the olden days, you just bring back who's alive. But now, especially for something like Ghostbusters, they make the main characters Harold Ramis' children, Egon Spengler's children. And then, at the end of the movie, the original Ghostbusters just show up out of the blue to help. And alongside them is a CGI Harold Ramis as a ghost. That sort of stuff makes my skin crawl. It's like walking over somebody's grave and then coming back and pulling out the skeleton and doing a little dance with it. I remember when that movie ended and they panned up into the sky and it says, "For Harold," in the stars. Gross. Terrible. And the annoying thing was, when I talked to people after this movie, they were just like, it was lovely. It was a lovely tribute to Harold Ramis. It was so good to see them all back together again. They weren't all back together of them. One of them is not there. He is dead. And I've talked to a lot of people about it who just could not see past it. They were just like, it was nice. It was sweet. I would be interested to talk to those people again. That was in 2021. Since then, we've had the writer's strike and the actor's strike. And a lot of what came out of those strikes is protection against AI and basically taking the likenesses of these people and just using it for profit without any sort of reimbursement or anything like that. AI taking jobs, essentially. The idea that you can scan an actor's face and 20 years' time when they're long dead, or who knows what's happened to them, you can just go, whoop, here they are. They're in the movie. The Flash movie. At the end, when all the multiverse movies are crashing together and you get a CGI Christopher Reeve and a CGI George Reeves, who notoriously may or may not have shot himself because he hated being Superman so much, and you've just put him in the movie as Superman. That's terrible. That sort of stuff now, I think people are like, oh, no, that's not a tribute. That's not a nice little love letter to fans. That's just dark and cold and gross. Aside from that, the rest of the movie takes itself way too seriously. Leading into our main point of this episode, why is the original Ghostbusters so good? I'll tell you why it's so good, because it is just a simple little comedy about four schlubs running a business. It's not about unlikely heroes that band together to take down a threat that will destroy the world. The world-ending threat is just an inconvenience that they are annoyingly roped into. If you've never seen the original Ghostbusters, you're missing out. It is really good. It's one of the best comedies of all time. One of the best performances from Bill Murray of all time. But basically, what it is about, it's set in New York in the present day at that time, which was 1984. You got three scientists. Peter Venkman, played by Bill Murray, who is a terrible womanizer who all he ever wants to do is basically date rape people. He notoriously turns up to a date with Sigourney Weaver, and he's got like tranquilizers in his bag. Why did he have that? Who knows? Then you got Ray Stantz, played by Dan Aykroyd, who is a genuine believer in the supernatural and ghosts and whatever. Very much like Dan Aykroyd in real life. Dan Aykroyd is an insane person. If you've ever seen him do interviews in real life, it's really weird. You should definitely go watch Nothing But Trouble, which is Dan Aykroyd completely off the leash and allowed to make whatever movie he wants. It's an insane film. And then you've got Harold Ramis's Egon Spengler, who's a very scientist. The guy who wants to create the gadgets and the gizmos and real test the boundaries of what they're doing. But, they're unrespected scientists. They've got nothing going on for them. They're broke as hell. And then they make a breakthrough with the possibility of using the science that Spengler is working on to, hey, maybe ghosts are real, and it's possible that we could contain them. Venkman, Bill Murray, is like, I don't believe that for a second, but I feel like this could be fun and make us some money, so let's do it. So they go off, they form their little Ghostbusters thing, very, very, very cheap. They do one of those ads where if you watch those 24-hour selling channels where it's like, hey, this piece of fork tin, if you roll it on your skin, makes cancer go away. Buy it now along with all these other things and we'll give you a hat. That's kind of like their ad. They hire Annie Potts to be a receptionist. But for the most part, things are not going well for them because ghosts just aren't around. And then finally they get called out to a situation, they catch the ghost and are instantly famous. And then you get a little montage of them catching ghosts, making money, causing shenanigans, but they're not becoming the heroes of New York or anything. It's all very self-serving and slimy in their approach. They hire an additional person, played by Ernie Hudson, Winston Zedmore, because they just, need a bit of help to deal with all the calls they're doing. And Winston Zedmore, for most of that movie, does not believe that they're actually catching ghosts. He's just there for a paycheck, which is pretty funny. Alongside all of that, what's going on, though, is they're building an interesting arc with Sigourney Weaver's character, who's Bill Murray's love interest. She's living in an apartment building across the way from Rick Moranis. She keeps having supernatural events sort of happen to her. Weird things going on. She opens a fridge and she can see demons. She keeps hearing rumblings about something called Zool. And then eventually, it turns out that this apartment building that she is in is like a gateway to hell or something, or a big demon's going to come through. It's been a while since I've watched this movie properly to actually give you the finer details of that. But, based on the architect who designed this thing, Zool's going to come through and destroy the world. Leading eventually to that final confrontation where, in order to save Sigourney Weaver and her baby, the Ghostbusters, having been shunned by society, having their money taken away by a terrible lawyer, go up to the top of this building, they fight Zool, they accidentally summon the giant marshmallow man that we all know and love, and then they save the day. And the movie ends immediately after that. They're literally standing in the street covered in slime and marshmallow, cracks in the road, and the credits are rolling, and they're just playing the Ghostbusters song from Ray Parker. Wonderful. All it is, it's just a funny comedy. It's not a superhero story. It's not a moment of good triumphing over evil or the underdog getting through. It's just 3 and then eventually 4 guys just running a business together, being a bit shady and having a laugh. That's all it is. And that's why it works. Its simplicity in its execution makes it such a strong thing. All the ghosts and stuff aside are just complementary to the fun that you're having. Even then, as soon as Ghostbusters finished, it's like even the people that made it didn't understand what they made and how they made it. Ghostbusters 2 came out not long after that. Of course you would. Ghostbusters was a huge hit. And a lot of that, I've seen Ghostbusters 2 a few times. I can't really tell you what happens in it because none of it is good enough to stick in my brain. You can tell watching it that Dan Aykroyd has sort of been let off the leash as well in writing the script and everything going on in it. They're taking the ghost subject stuff really seriously. Bill Murray does not want to be there. He does not give 2 shits. It's very Bill Murray of him. But doesn't matter because Ghostbusters as its own is good. And there are a lot of comedies from the 80s that had obligatory sequels that just are nowhere near in comparison to the original. Airplane 2, for instance. And it led to the cartoons and the theme park rides and everything else that just kept the Ghostbusters spirit alive. But looking back on it, I don't understand how people can see that movie and be like, it's a superhero movie, they're awesome, and then go watch Ghostbusters Afterlife, and you've got Finn Wolfhead walking up to the Ecto-1, and there's like Star Wars magic music as he's running his hand over it or whatever. And just be like, what are you talking about? It's just a hearse that Dan Aykroyd painted white. Anyway, the moral of this whole thing is basically Ghostbusters 1984 is a true classic. It's wonderful. It's fantastic. Everybody should see it. It's definitely one of the 100 movies you should see before you die. But somewhere along the lines, probably somehow even immediately after this movie came out, people forgot why they enjoyed it or cannot understand how to interpret what is good about it, which has led to a forgettable Ghostbusters 2. A Ghostbusters remake in 2016 that almost did pretty much exactly what the first one did, just worse. And for people to be like, that's not what the Ghostbusters is about. And then to have Ghostbusters Afterlife literally directed by Ivan Reitman's son, and it being all nostalgia and wonder and magic, and the Ghostbusters are heroes of old. And look, it's Ghost Harold Ramis. He's dead. He didn't okay this, but it's alright because we love him. Garbage. Having said all that, I will be seeing Ghostbusters Frozen Empire opening night. From what I can see from trailers, they're back in New York. There's the Ice Ghosts. The original Ghostbusters are in it for more than cameos. Apparently, according to advertising is notoriously misleading in Hollywood. As well as Paul Rudd and his friends are all back as well. I feel like this is going to lean even more into the nostalgia stuff. Look, they're in New York. Look, Walter Peck, that terrible lawyer that tried to shut down the Ghostbusters, is now mayor. Look, Annie Potts is a Ghostbuster. She wasn't before. Of course she was. Just because she answered the phone doesn't mean she... Anyway. I'm an optimist. I like to think that I'm going to go see Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and I'm going to be like, wow, they listened to everything I said about the first one. They've dialed it back. They know how to approach this. This is going to be the Ghostbusters sequel that we want and deserve. But I think it's going to be more of the same, and I'm going to be disappointed, and the review is going to be grumpy. But I will say this, it's definitely not going to be as grumpy as the Ghostbusters Afterlife review, because at least I know what I'm in for. There you are. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. As I said, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Hopefully not. I'll be back in a couple of days for your Ghostbusters Frozen Empire review. And after that, we got a Kung Fu Panda 4 review coming. A bit late, but Australia didn't get it for a couple of weeks. And then immediately after that, a Godzilla and Kong, the New Empire review. Which, boy oh boy, I'm excited for that one. So I hope you listen to all of that. That would be really nice if you did. If you don't, that's okay. You do you. I understand. Anyway, until next time, I love and appreciate you as always. It means a lot to me that you would listen for even a second. It truly does. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.